Right now, a historic moment. We can now project the winner of the presidential race. CNN projects Donald Trump wins the presidency. The business tycoon and TV personality capping his improbable political journey with an astounding upset victory. Donald J. Trump will become the 45th president of the United States, defeating Hillary Clinton in a campaign unlike anything we've seen in our lifetime.
The 2016 election was one of the most divisive presidential elections in recent history. Republican candidate Donald Trump won the support of conservatives and many people looking for a change in Washington, D.C. President Trump won the Electoral College vote, but lost the popular vote by 3 million votes. The result of the election further split the public opinion. After Trump was sworn in as president, there were massive protest rallies in Washington, D.C. and in cities across the country. There was also a rash of hate crimes against minorities, many of whom supported the Democratic candidate Hillary Clinton. Now, months later, the divisions only seem to be deepening. Progressives have expressed outrage over the president's actions, including attempts to ban Muslims entering the country and the recent firing of the FBI director who was investigating Trump. They view the president as an attempt to undo many of the social programs that help low-income and disadvantaged Americans in order to provide more tax breaks to companies and those who are already wealthy.
So here we are, 60-plus days into his presidency, and we want to get your grades and your impressions of how President Trump is doing. So, Tony Ann, let me start with you. What grade you give President Trump? An A already.
At the time, approval for the new president remains high among conservatives, especially in rural areas, who see Trump as a change to business-as-usual politics, like trade policy, that have left them behind economically. They see the president as unfairly criticized and undermined by the media and progressive leaders, especially in the U.S. Senate. Conservatives believe that Trump's policies would be good for America if he is given the chance to lead.
I give him an A.
This social divide has been exacerbated by the proliferation of news sources that cater to specific political beliefs. On the left, progressives are told about Trump scandals in the online pages of the Huffington Post, or watch pundits like Rachel Maddow on channels like MSNBC.
Until such time as the world comes to its senses, what on God's green earth does that mean? And I ask you guys through this camera, I ask you guys these questions a lot these days when it comes to covering the transition to the new administration. The difference tonight.
Meanwhile, those of the right claim that mainstream media has a liberal bias and is distorting the actions of conservative leaders. Instead, they put their trust in conservative media sources like talk radio shows such as Rush Limbaugh and channels like Fox News.
A lot of people like it. They say you're tough. They're glad you're going after people when they attack you. But you have people on both sides of the aisle that are saying you're going after your enemies on Twitter. They want you to stop it. Will you?
Well, most of the people that want me to stop it are the enemies, I'll be honest with you. The enemies would like me to stop it. If I felt the media were honest, all of it, or most of it, I wouldn't do it.
Given the current animosity each of these two political cultures has for the other, is it possible that American unity will ever return, or is it lost forever? Americans do rally together during times of crisis, despite political differences. The public came together to fight the threat of Nazism in the 20th century. Franklin Delano Roosevelt famously said that the only thing the country has to fear was fear itself. In the 21st century, there is perhaps no better example of this unity than what happened after the terrorist attacks of 9/11. The American unity that occurred after 9/11 was absent immediately before the attacks. In fact, the country was reeling from the aftermath of another divisive presidential election, this time between Vice President Al Gore and Texas Governor George W. Bush. Bush had won the presidential election by a single electoral college vote, even though Gore had won the popular vote by 500,000 votes. A recount had dragged on in the state of Florida, where a handful of votes in a single county would determine the entire election. Then, the conservative-leaning Supreme Court ended the recount, resulting in anger and outrage among Democrats who had backed Gore. The country was deeply divided.
Tom, the protesting is now very intense as we're coming up here. A lot of National Organization for Women screaming fraud, Bush stole the election. The police are now in about 3 or 4 rows deep along here.
Only a few months into the Bush presidency, the tragedy of 9/11 struck. The unthinkable happened. Although Americans were used to seeing terrorist attacks in foreign countries, we had largely been spared. The terrorist attacks brought the country together in terms of its sorrow for the victims and demands that those responsible for the acts be brought to justice. Despite the differences that have been brought up by the election, the American people rallied, and Democrats and Republicans joined behind the president for a period of time. We interviewed a few people who witnessed 9/11 and its aftermath to ask them about the unity that followed the tragedy.
So how did 9/11 affect you and other citizens?
9/11 was a tragic event, and it affected all of us in some of the same ways and many different ways.
It kind of brought everybody together as like a unifying effect.
So you think that you and other citizens were more united after the event?
Yes, definitely.
I definitely think and feel that our country was united after that, during and after that event.
Was there a difference of the culture of people before and after the event?
Well, there was a pretty stressful election. Florida, hanging chads that no one had ever heard before. So there was a lot of that going on. But after we were attacked, people kind of came together.
Yeah. Do you think that Bush had to do anything with the unity after 9/11?
I think at the time and place of the event that President Bush's presence and his confidence level and support to the people was very much needed and heard.
Yeah, so Bush was just kind of a leader that was there, and he kind of helped a little bit with the unity.
He did for a long time, yeah.
Yeah.
Climbing up on the pile of the wreckage with firefighters.
Thank you all. What's the plan, George? I want you all to know.
President Bush encouraged the spirit of unity through his words and deeds following 9/11. He stood with first responders at the site of the destroyed World Trade Center in New York. Putting his arm around a firefighter, he looked like a man of the people and rallied the American spirit of resilience. He also promoted unity by visiting a mosque and spoke out against acts of hatred targeting Muslims. Unfortunately, the newfound unity did not last. President Bush squandered his high popularity ratings by pushing for tax cuts and then leading the country into an unpopular war in Iraq. By the time he left office, Bush was one of the most unpopular presidents in history. Nobody wants another horrific event or terrorist attack to bring the country together, but there are already other crises impacting the United States that could unite Americans, one of which is the opioid abuse crisis that is sweeping through many rural areas of the U.S., including small towns in Ohio. Another is continued hate crimes against Americans in the LGBTQ community. Many of the victims of these attacks are friends, family, neighbors, and co-workers. A leader who brought people together with a common goal of fixing these crises could contribute to a return of American unity, like Roosevelt during World War II and Bush immediately after 9/11, a leader who appealed to the best in Americans and what unites them as a people might be able to heal some of the divisions we see today. Right now, Ohio Governor Kasich is promoting a new book called To Pass that calls for a return to shared American values.
But at the end, you want to bring people together. And it's not just a book about politics, it's also a book about the fact that we all need to start listening to one another. We can't be divided. Nothing works if we're always fighting.
Without a return to bipartisanship and compromise, we will continue to see stalemate in Washington, D.C. unless one political party holds all of the branches of government. As we are currently seeing, the party in power will seek to push forward its agenda without considering the concerns of the other side, making the divisions worse. This happened recently when the Republican-controlled House of Representatives passed legislation to replace the Affordable Care Act, an achievement of President Obama, without the involvement of the Democrats.
Fleeing. It's been a catastrophe, and this is a great plan. I actually think it will get even better. And this is, make no mistake, this is a repeal and a replace of Obamacare. Make no mistake about it.
The President of the United States has an important role to play in setting the tone of American politics. Like Bush, President Trump had an opportunity to bring the country closer together to fix some of the crises many American families face, such as the opioid epidemic and hate crimes against minorities. If President Trump were to move away from the tactics of bullying and intimidation to push forward his agenda and instead appeal to shared American values of decency, compassion, and resourcefulness, we may see an improvement. So far, he has yet to demonstrate interest in this type of leadership and has succumbed to his impulses to attack and belittle those who disagree with him.
President Trump's behavior and his delivery of information and his choice not to answer direct questions is definitely contributing to having the division.
Only time will tell if this president will be able to appeal to the better nature of Americans and unify the country, or if he will leave the nation even further divided.